Mic's not on? Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's what? Huh? Let's try again. It's a horse. Yeah. Like I said, it's not a trick question. It's a horse. Of course. Yes. All right. Now, did you know that you can make a violin out of a horse? Did you know that? You can make a violin out of a horse. Oh, wait a minute. What is that? It's the overhead view of a horse. That's not a violin. It's a horse. You're looking straight down on it. It's all a matter of your perspective, isn't it, as to what it actually can look like. Kind of reminds me of the way sometimes you can see something happen or read something. Let's say, for example, you watch your favorite TV show one evening. You go to work the next day, and you're talking, or to school, whatever, and you're talking to somebody, and they watch the same show, and they remember something completely different about that show. You ever had that happen? You know, maybe you were zoned out for a second and missed what they caught, and they were zoned out for a second and they missed what you caught, right? Or, you know, we've always all heard, you know, if 3 people witness an automobile accident, how many versions of the accident do you have? 3. Because everybody remembers things just a little bit different. Everybody has a slightly different perspective. Happens all the time. It can happen when you're reading the Bible too. You can read something in the Bible, and I can read that same thing in the Bible, and I really latch on to this thought or this fact or this event, and you latch on to something completely different. For example, what's this passage mean to you? Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to sin are bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come. It'd be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him. And if he repents, forgive him. If he sins against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times comes back to you and says, I repent, forgive him. The apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. He replied, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and thrown into the sea, and it will obey you. Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Would he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now and sit down to eat? Would he not rather say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink. Would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you've done everything you were told to do, should say, we're unworthy servants. We've only done our duty. There's a lot of stuff in that passage that we'd like to unpack. We'll get to some of it. But my question is, does Jesus make you want that kind of faith by what he says there? Or does he discourage you into thinking, I can never do that? Uproot a mulberry tree, throw it into the sea with just my faith? No, it's not even possible. If that's your reaction, then consider this. The one who said this is the one who can teach you faith in every level of trial that you face in your life. In this text, the disciples asked Jesus to increase their faith. Remember? Why? Why did they ask him? Why did they tell him? It wasn't really even a question. It was just, Lord, increase our faith. Why? It's because he said something about how we should forgive the repentant person over and over and over. And they said, we got to have more faith to be able to do that, Lord. There's no way I can forgive somebody 7 times in a day, then turn around and do it again? What was Jesus' response? It doesn't take much faith at all to be able to do big things. That's my summary of what he said. Doesn't take much. However, if with our faith we only do small things, basic things, if that's all that gets done through our faith, then so what? Does that make you faithful? How does it make you faithful? That kind of seems to be Jesus' thoughts on the matter anyway, doesn't it? If you're only doing the bare minimum, don't break your arm patting yourself on the back. He discusses a servant who fixes a meal for the master. Well, yeah, Jesus' point, yeah, that's what he's supposed to do. And I understand we cringe a little bit at that kind of talk, don't we? We're talking about servants and masters. Long time ago, 1982, I spent the summer in Zaire, Africa, which is now known, I believe, as Democratic Republic of the Congo. But I spent a little over 2 months over there with a bunch of missionaries and got to know a lot of the Zaire people as well. And the missionaries all had what they called houseboys. Zaire men who would work in their homes doing the cooking, the cleaning, yard work, whatever. And I got to admit, I was uncomfortable with that. When I first got over there and they all had their houseboys and they'd say, one of them, I remember his name was Hangi, Hangi, I believe is how he would have spelled it, Hangi. Hangi, go trim the bushes. Hangi, we need supper at 5 o'clock. Whatever. I was kind of uncomfortable with it. It was kind of like ordering this guy around. But the more I was there and the more I got to know Hangi and some of the other houseboys, as they were called, and the more I talked to the missionaries, I realized those people who worked for the missionaries were treated extremely well, treated with great respect. They were very admired by the other African people because they worked in the home of a missionary. It was not a put-down kind of position. It was a position that actually elevated that houseboy, not only in the eyes of the missionaries, but in the eyes of his friends and family as well. Basically, they were employees. To put it in terms that you and I would use here in the United States, it was a employer-employee relationship. Well, we can understand that. You have or have had a job. Or in the case of some of the young ones, you will. One of these days, you'll have a job. And when you have that job, you're going to be expected to go do things that your boss tells you that you're supposed to do. But I'm going to tell you right now, the person that's going to be more likely to get a raise is the one who also does other stuff when they see that it needs to be done, even if it's not in his job description. If you will jump in and do what needs to be done because you're there and you're capable, it's going to be noticed. And that's really what Jesus' point is here. I don't think we can even assume that Jesus is approving of the servant master culture. All he's doing is speaking from within the culture that his hearers were familiar with. There were people who had servants, and so Jesus used that as an example. He's not automatically condoning this just because he refers to it. I think it might be a fair paraphrase of Jesus' words here to say the problem is not your lack of faith. The problem is your lack of action. Or if you put it another way, if you were doing what you ought to be doing, then you'd see the results that you're looking for. And when I hear that one, I kind of think, ouch, a little bit. If I was doing what I ought to be doing, I'd be seeing what I want to see. It's not really a magic formula, is it? How would you measure? I don't answer out loud, but just think to yourself, how would I measure my faith? Jesus talks about the size of a mustard seed, which is really, really tiny. And that's big. So what are you measuring your faith as? What are you comparing it to? If you have faith of any kind, it's not because you're smarter than the next guy. It's not because you're more spiritual than the next guy. Because that kind of faith, that breeds pride and arrogance. Oh, well, I'm farther along than that guy is. That's not faith. Faith shouldn't breed pride. Faith also doesn't come from your breeding. Just because your parents were Christians doesn't mean you will be. That doesn't cover you. It doesn't automatically transfer. It's not like a genetic code. It's your faith or lack thereof. God doesn't have grandchildren. You're his child or not. And remember this also. If you want to have faith, you got to stretch it out. It's the only way you get it to grow. It's just like your muscles. If you want your muscles to get stronger, what do? Sit in the chair all day, right? And move popcorn and peanuts to your mouth. No, that ain't going to do it. You got to exercise. You got to work out. You got to have a plan. And over time, maybe a month from now, you'll find that you can do more than you could yesterday because you're stretching those muscles out. It's the same thing with our faith. It doesn't grow massively overnight. It's pretty rare when it does. But if you are stretching it out, if you're exercising it, if you're using it, it's going to get stronger. You need more faith? Work it. Step out beyond what you're comfortable with and just watch God take over. And I guess I kind of need to stop at this point right here. I'm standing up here. I'm the only one in the room that can see this right now. But I see the yellow caution tape across that back door. Why? Because we're stepping out on faith a little bit here. We got a project going back there. And I don't know, Jerry, if you're going to say anything later or not, but I'm just going to go ahead and let you know, we don't have all the money we need to finish what we have started yet. Hint, hint. Okay? I mean, we got a good chunk to get started with, but Ronnie, who's overseeing the whole project there, he's talked to us a few times about, we got to have a plan here. I mean, I know how much money's in the account, and I know what it's going to cost back there, he's saying, and then, there's a discrepancy. So you can see we're serious. We're doing it, but we still need some help. Now, we got a couple options available to us, but one of the options, I'd say 3 options, and one of them is y'all. Y'all doing what you can. So there you go. You're thinking, well, I don't know if I can. Have you stretched your faith in that way yet? Or is it time that you step out a little bit, work your faith, stretch it, and just see what God can do with it? Because that's the way faith works. It will expand to fit our needs. It's like a can of spiritual great stuff. You know that stuff? You spray that can of stuff and you got a gap someplace around a pipe or whatever, and you spray this little bitty bead of it, and then you just sit back and watch. Right? You don't put a bunch, because you'll have a bunch times 5 if you put a bunch. Well, your faith is kind of like that. If you put your faith to the test, you're going to find God is worthy and reliable. And your faith will grow because you're letting it out of that can. You're using it. Now, I've talked before about a guy named John Bunyan. John Bunyan lived back in the 1600s. He was a Christian, he was a preacher, he was an author, and he wrote a book called The Pilgrim's Progress, and I've talked about this book before, I know. But before John Bunyan wrote this masterpiece, he was thrown in jail in the year 1660 for preaching about Jesus. And he was in prison for 12 years. And, prison is not a desirable place, right? But it was even less desirable, whatever, that 350 years ago or whatever that was. Pretty primitive, pretty harshly treated. He was there for 12 years. He later claimed that was when his faith deepened, when he was in prison. Why? Because while he was in prison, his faith was tested, and it grew. It's really not going to grow if it's not being tested, is it? But that's not even the whole story. He was released after 12 years, and he wound up in prison again, and then, that second time that he was in prison, he wrote The Pilgrim's Progress. Because his faith was growing. If you only live a surface life with your faith, that means you're not being challenged. As unpleasant as it might seem when you're going through it, your burdens can deepen your faith. They can deepen the roots of your faith. It's kind of like I remember not long after my wife and I got married, she grew up on a farm. I did not at all. And I don't remember who the farmer was, somebody, I think it was somebody at the church where I was, mentioned that we kind of need some dry time early on for the crops. I said, I thought you always wanted rain. He said, no, you want a little bit of dry period also, because if the soil is wet all the time as those plants are just starting to grow, the roots don't have to go very deep at all to find moisture. And then you get a big wind with a August thunderstorm, and they don't have any roots to hold them up. So you want a little bit of hard time for it. I think there's a lesson there for us, isn't there? I think there is. God has an inexhaustible supply of faithfulness just waiting for you. This man's name was John D. Rockefeller. Some of you are going to recognize that family name. He was one of the, if not the, richest men in the world 100 or so years ago. He was kind of the Elon Musk of his day. Probably nothing that he couldn't have afforded to buy for his kids, for his family, anybody. He had all the money he could possibly need. One of his daughters, though, was obsessed with the fear of dying without a penny to her name. I mean, can you imagine a Rockefeller worried about going broke? Crazy. Crazy. A child of God worried about going to the well of faith in God's garden and finding it dry. Isn't that crazy? Absolutely crazy. But you and I both know there are Christians who feel that way. Christians who feel like, oh, no, I can't take that chance. God might not, he might not take care of me. There are churches that operate that way. I'm glad to say that this church doesn't appear to be one of them. Awesome. I mean, people in churches that never venture out at all to do great things for God because they're afraid that it's not going to happen, afraid it's not going to be covered. Folks, the problem isn't a lack of faith, but it's that fact that we don't put that faith into action sometimes. It's almost like we live by the flip version of the slogan that we've all heard. Look at that. Don't do something, just sit there. Some people operate their lives that way, don't they? That's not really the way you're going to grow. Now, there's the other side of that too. There are people who always have to stay busy because they're uncomfortable when they're not. I understand the Japanese culture. You ask a Japanese person, hey, how's it going? He's going to say, oh, I'm very busy. I'm very busy. Because in the Japanese culture, it's almost considered a sin to be idle. And so no one ever wants to admit that they're not busy, that they're not doing something, because you got to be busy. It's wrong if you're not busy. Some of us are kind of like that too. Not because our faith is pushing us. We're just uncomfortable if we're still. It causes anxiety or something. There's a delicate balance somewhere, isn't there, between the two? Obsessed with action and afraid of action. Somewhere in between there is right where you need to be. We need to give feet to our convictions, folks. Imagine what you'll see. Imagine what you'll experience if you put feet on your faith and start walking with it. Where do you think God could take you? Where do you think God could take us? Faith the size of a mustard seed? You ever wonder what that actually even means? I mean, how do you measure faith? I think what Jesus seems to be saying here is pretty simple. It doesn't take a lot of faith to perform miracles. Even a tiny little amount of faith is going to do. What really matters is if we take the faith that we have and put it to work. That's what we're supposed to do. And then tomorrow, if you need more faith to get through the day, guess what? It will be there, because it's a little stronger today, or a little stronger tomorrow than it has been today. That's how your mustard seed faith becomes strong enough to move a tree. Possible? Impossible? Give it a shot. We're going to sing our invitation hymn. The invitation hymn is, I've said this almost every time this is the invitation. I will say this about this song and a couple others. One of the hardest songs ever to sing, if you mean it. It's not a hard melody. It's a very simple, basic melody. But do you really mean those words? Or are you just saying them? Have your way, Lord.